general sense. In a very vulgar sense now, we'll see that this sort of transcends temporality. But the work precedes, informs the artist as such. The artist, we recognize from before, is the source, right? The artist is the origin of also the work. So, in a sense, if it was just the work and the artist, this could be bidirectional, right? It could be bidirectional. The work informs the artist informs the work. It's not that Heidegger is contradicting himself, he means exactly that. However, it isn't just bidirectional because there's two other aspects that we need to incorporate at this sort of very dense aesthetic level, right? The aesthetic analysis at this level is, and I feel like I'm going too fast, but the aesthetic, and too deep, the aesthetic analysis at this level is a recognition of the interrelationship between the work and the artist as both origin and essence. And that should make sense, right? Hopefully. Then, we recognize that the essence, as we said before, we recognize that the essence of the work of art, initially our main question, what is the essence of art? Well, we recognize that the essence is itself preceded by the origin, right? The origin informs the essence, and we recognize that the artist is the origin. Therefore, the artist informs the essence. Essentially what it is to be an artist, essentially what art is, right? I did that a little quick, so I'll slow down. I'll do that one more time. We recognize that we initially started with that question, what is the essence of art? But we saw that there was something more primordial, more foundational, more conceptually tenuous, but also conceptually seminal, meaning more conceptually disjointed, but also more conceptually foundational. And that was the origin. But we saw that the origin and the artist are inextricably bound, so that the artist informs the essence, right? Which is why the artist comes before. Right? This is all, and I'll give you the textual justification for all of this. So then we see then that the essence of art is that which, I don't want to use the word motivates, but that which produces, right? That which creates, that sort of creative ability, and I don't want to jump ahead also, but that creative ability, the essence, in a very general sense, so I don't spoil this, because you gotta wait for the goodies. But the essence is that which entices, elicits that creative ability in the artist to create the activity, that action, me, here, now, right? It's the desire, if you will, at this sort of superficial level, to produce the work, right? So that the activity then, and we know what the activity is, right? You remember the relationship of artist and activity. The activity, in sort of an Aristotelian efficient cause, the activity is the act of, activity, act. The activity is the production of the work through the activity as means, and I drew this earlier, so now I can talk about it more conceptually dense. Through the activity of the artist as means, we come about the work of art, right? Through the act of painting, through the act of carving, through the act of sculpting, through the act of performance and playing and reciting, we create the work so that the work is itself a consequence of the activity. But these are super interrelated, right? It's not the case, and I want to be very clear here. It is not the case. We don't, as human beings, have the ability to conceptualize this. We probably can conceptualize it, but I can't think of a way to draw this so that it's not temporarily bound. Temporally bound, not temporarily. That it's not bound in time, right? I want this to be asynchronous. Let's be technical, right? I don't want this to be a synchronous relationship. I want it to be an asynchronous relationship. That the interrelation between the work and the artist and the essence and the activity and the work isn't something that follows a succession, a synchronous sort of procession or succession. That the interrelation of these concepts and actors and players is asynchronously bound. It's more of it's more of a semiotic, if you will, symbiotic binding. I don't have words to really describe it. I shouldn't be evoking sort of biological terms here, but a beneficial relationship between parts is the best way that I can conceptualize it. And even me at this level, it's very difficult. And a quick side note too, also in producing these lecture notes, I found myself being challenged by the limitation of language to try and conceptualize and lecture on something as conceptually dense as this initial lecture. Okay, so hopefully this, it seems dense, and I said I was going to go deep. I didn't think it was going to get this deep, but now I'm producing the lecture, I'm listening to myself, I'm like, it sounds pretty hairy, if you will. Here's the justification for parts, so that you don't think I'm making this up, right? It's in the text, and I also didn't borrow this image from anyone. This is a product of my philosophical analysis of Heidegger. Alright, so let's look at the justification for this, right? Justification for this whole thing. Okay, so A. The work is the origin of the artist. The work is the origin of the artist. Check. B. The artist is the source of the artist is the source of the essence. The artist is the source of the essence. Check. C. The work arises out of, and I should underline that too, and by means of, should underline that too, the activity, right? The work arises out of, and by means of, the activity of the artist. Check. And then D, the essence of the work is a consequence of the activity of the artist. Sort of both of these interrelations produces an understanding of the essence. Check. Alright, this is out of the text. So that we see there is an interrelationship between the work, the artist, the essence, and the activity of the artist. And the idea, at this point, is not to be definitive. In no sense am I saying that this is definitive. We can have and we will have, more complex understanding of the interrelation of parts because there's more concepts that we need. But at this sort of introductory level, this is actually not too introductory, but at this sort of beginning, fragile level of our analysis into aesthetics, what I want you to recognize, more so than just a brute memorization of these parts, is a recognition of the complexity of the work. In a sense, the work becomes a keystone, a linchpin, right? The work of art, because it has this bifurcated, if you will, functionality. There's a sense in which the work is the consequence of the activity. But there is also a sense in which we'll need to have more conceptual understanding of later, the work is also a means with which we can demonstrate, inform, motivate future artists. There is a sense in which, in very sort of common sense way, there is a sense in which this lecture series, as the product of artistic labor, informs a community of potential artists, if those artists happen to be philosophers wanting to do video series on YouTube, right? In a sense, you demonstrate that mastery through a call for participation,